So as IPEC already introduced me today, I will repeat, my name is Andrea Carita, and I have been working in education now already for 15 years. I'm a lecturer of intercultural communication and cross-cultural management, and I work at Amsterdam School of International Business. First of all, let's talk about why we stereotype and why we have biases, and the connection that I will make today will be in business. First of all, stereotypes are a necessary evil, and I will explain why they are necessary first. In the time of our ancestors, stereotypes were a survival mechanism, and they helped them to escape from danger. If they heard a noise in the savannah, it was better, safer to run away from danger. In our modern times, of course, we are not running away from danger in the forest, but we want to respond quickly to people we never saw before. And to solve complex matters with minimal thinking effort. So it's the autopilot system 1, actually, which is more emotional and more based on gut feeling, that takes charge instead of autopilot system 2, which is more rational. In fact, we already have a first impression of someone in the first 100 milliseconds. Let's do a small test. Who do you think is this man? Look carefully. Look again. Well, James Laughlin, I don't know if you know him, father, son, youth counselor, motivational speaker, etc., etc. But the tendency of people, because of bias and stereotypes, is to have totally different ideas. So first impressions are really powerful and connected with the idea of stereotypes and biases. First of all, let's talk about the relationship between stereotype and bias. A stereotype is usually a fixed belief we have about a certain person or a group of persons. Is usually a very generalized and fixed assumption. From the moment that stereotypes turn into some kind of preference or tendency or pattern, then they become biases. In fact, biases, the other way around, stereotypes can lead to biased behavior. An example is when an assumption we have about someone influences our hiring decision. As we often associate a CEO of a company with a white man, this assumption can influence a hiring decision by excluding a woman from getting this position. I'm now going to talk about some consequences, some negative consequences of bias. And one is that biases actually shape our social expectations. So they actually constrain us within limited life choices, and they deny us opportunities to explore and develop. According to some studies, candidates of certain groups, such as mothers, people with obesity, gay men, are rated less hired, gaining less salary, and seen as less competent. When these kind of groups choose certain jobs, that choice is made in the context of biases and never entirely a free will. There are some more pitfalls, more negative consequences of biases, poor performance and lack of confidence. First, I'm going to give an example of poor performance. Latinos perform less good on tasks that are described as diagnostic of intelligence, as they suffer from a stereotype that their group is less educated. In fact, if you hear a stereotype, you start doubting yourself, believing in it, and performing less. This is what we can call self-fulfilling prophecy. The other example I would like to give is lack of confidence. Women have been traditionally educated to be obedient, pleasant, beautiful. Men have been taught to be tough, assertive, and clever. And this difference in education and in different expectations of social roles then have caused that men started to become more confident compared to women. And that's why it's so important to boost women's confidence, as confidence leads to better performance and vice versa. Let me now give you a couple of examples of kinds of biases. I'm not going to cover all kinds of biases, but I just thought of highlighting a couple of biases that usually have an important impact in the way we do business and the way we work with each other. The first one is in-group bias. In-group bias means a tendency to just trust the people that look like you. In fact, it is very common that we look for people that look like us, that have similar hobbies, similar preferences, etc. This is the most common form of bias, which can be seen, for example, in hiring people similar to you, while this is actually a subconscious process of discriminating others. On the right side of this slide, you can see a Japanese bathhouse with a sign saying no foreigners. So this can be a very open, a very clear example of in-group bias. Let's now talk about gender bias, very pervasive. And I will give you a couple of examples. For instance, computer code written by women usually have a better rating than code by men, but only if the gender was not revealed. Another example, female lawyers with masculine sounding names like Barney, Dale have a better chance of becoming a judge. And finally here, regarding gender bias, women with kids, usually women with kids are valued less competent, less suitable for hiring or for even getting promotions. The next one that I'm going to talk about is minority pool bias. What does it mean? Minority pool bias is a tendency to negatively evaluate marginalized groups. The example that I'm going to give you is with names, with the way we pronounce names. In fact, the ability to pronounce a name is closely connected to the relationship we have with a person. The closer we are with that person, and the easier it will be to pronounce the name. In fact, our brains are very sensitive to words we cannot pronounce. So it is usually an emotional reaction from the brain, and that's why we tend to get a bit more bias with names that we don't know how to pronounce. In fact, white-sounding name is worth about 8 years of work experience. Charlie Sheen sounds better than Ramon Antonio Esteves, or Chloe Bennett sounds better than Chloe Wang, etc., etc. And the other example I want to give is related with crime. African Americans with no criminal record have, in fact, similar callback rates for interviews as white men who just came out of prison. So this is also a great example of minority pool bias. And I would like to introduce another one in this list, the last one, confirmation bias. What does it mean? Confirmation bias, usually confirmation bias causes us to look for evidence that fits our, most of the time, false beliefs, prompting us to create a reality that fits that belief. In other words, we only see what we want to see. I have given you a couple of examples of bias, and now I would like you to think. And if possible, you could very quickly write in the chat, in what situations does bias play a role? Different situations. I already gave you a couple of examples. Could you please write in the chat, in what situations does bias play a role? In hiring, indeed, hiring is one of the best, or most prevalent situations in which we see bias. And the other examples? In relationships, indeed, in our relationships, in our friendships. We just talked about this minority pool bias, a tendency to just look for people that look like us in terms of preferences and cultural backgrounds, hobbies, interests. I also see in the chat business partnerships, absolutely, this tendency is very strong of choosing partners that are similar, because it costs always less energy and less effort to our brains. So that is why it is a very instinctive reaction we have. Yeah, good. I've seen a couple of examples. Let me see if I see anything else. I don't think so. Political decisions, absolutely. It's great how we can see here different reactions from business to relationships, career promotion, and influencing political decisions, absolutely. Very good. Let's proceed. Indeed, the example I gave and I emphasized today was in hiring decisions, but also think of media coverage, admissions to schools, universities. How about laws, law enforcement? I also gave an example of crime accusations. What kind of groups is more likely to get accused of fraud compared to other groups of people? And I also would like to share with you an example of bias in artificial intelligence. Let's watch the next movie.
We as humans are biased. We have a lot of prejudices, some that we know about and some that we don't. And there's this idea that if you turn over decision making to computers instead of humans, that we can avoid some of these biases. But we're learning that algorithms can be just as biased as the humans that create them. Algorithms are becoming more and more involved in major decisions in many industries. They're already helping decide who gets a loan, who's hired or fired, who can travel freely, and even who's arrested and how long they go to jail. If these algorithms are flawed or biased, it could actually amplify injustice and inequality. AI is only as sharp as the data it learns from. For instance, a study at MIT Media Lab found that the leading facial recognition systems correctly identified white male faces 99% of the time. But with dark-skinned female faces, it made mistakes up to 35% of the time. That's likely because the data used to train the software is often overwhelmingly white and male. One widely used data set was estimated to be more than 75% male and 80% white. ProPublica recently investigated the algorithms used in courtrooms used to predict the risk of criminals committing future crimes. These risk assessments can be used to help make critical decisions like who can be released from prison and how much the bail amount should be. They found that the algorithms falsely predicted black defendants to be future criminals at almost twice the rate of white defendants. But researchers are shining a light on these systems, the people that create them and the data they train on. They're part of a movement calling for algorithmic accountability.
On purpose, interrupting this video because I have a question for you. Please write in the chat your ideas. And after having watched this video about bias in artificial intelligence, I wonder, and I would like to know your thoughts, what do you think would be ways of dealing with this kind of biases in artificial intelligence? Okay, I see. Start seeing some reactions, questioning their effectiveness. This is indeed point number one, yeah. I see also some reactions. It was shocking, yeah. So questioning their effectiveness, indeed, the algorithms are not always that effective for several reasons, as we could see in this movie. What are your thoughts on this? What could be done to combat this kind of biases? Very good. I see here a great idea. How about hiring the others? Yeah. Hiring the others? Yeah. Try to find out, underline the hidden biases, trying to see what is behind these hidden biases. Very good. Very good. Any other ideas? Okay, I see a little correction. Underline the hidden biases that underpins them. Yeah, these are great ideas. And encourage people to improve, these artificial intelligence algorithms. Yeah. Great. Great. Let me see now if I can just come back to where I was. Very important.
As algorithms get more complicated, as we start using machine learning and artificial intelligence, even as they become more powerful, they're becoming less transparent, which means it's hard for us to be able to really tell why an algorithm is behaving the way it is, why it made a decision the way it did. So transparency is becoming more difficult, but it's very important in order to make sure that these algorithms aren't behaving in a biased way. This is a reminder that the diversity is incredibly important among the groups of people that are actually creating the algorithms, because without diversity, biases can be baked into these algorithms, and so they'll behave in a prejudiced way, just like a biased person would.
So as you can see, one way is indeed to create diversity within the group that is creating these algorithms. And actually someone was very close to that, one of the reactions in the chat. I would like to share with you one more example.
They'll behave because of a reminder that the diversity is incredibly made a decision the way it did.
Sorry, I just
so
want
transparency
to
is becoming
the next slide, but it's not allowing me. No worries, and I just continue. One more that I would like to share with you. I don't know if you are familiar with this. I'm sure you are, considering the studies you are doing. If you are a person with dark skin, chances are that you may be more likely than your white friends to get hit by a self-driving car. And it is because these kind of cars, automated cars, are better at detecting pedestrians with lighter skin tones. So this just to add one more example of how bias can affect the way people are working in artificial intelligence and the people who are benefiting or not benefiting from artificial intelligence. I'd like to conclude this presentation by giving you some the most important ideas that have been discussed in this session. One, stereotypes many times very often lead to biased behavior, especially when they turn into some kind of tendency, some kind of behavior. They have negative consequences, such as life choice. They constrain our life choices and they can lead to lower performance. We've seen different kinds of biases based on gender, race, and other kinds of groups. Many aspects of life can be impacted by biases, from hiring opportunities to artificial intelligence. Some ways of combating these biases first of all, by acknowledging that we all have biases. This is an unconscious process. So first of all, we all should accept that we are biased. Other suggestions: do an unconscious bias test. Do a bias training. And if these two things, the bias test and the bias training, are done in an environment which is not feeling threatened, if you can do this in a safety environment, this can be already a very good starting point to deal with biases. Also, having diversity, like we saw in the previous video, having diversity in the group that is hiring or the group that is creating these algorithms. This will, if we follow some of these ideas, this will definitely contribute to fundamental advances we need to take in the upcoming years to meet our business objectives and to achieve conscious, more tolerant, more diverse digital transformation. And the future is yours. So I hope I have given you some food for thought. Thank you very much.